Good morning, everyone. Today, I'd like to invite you to explore with me this idea that brokenness leads to healing. Um, as we begin, uh, as we do each morning, I want to invite you to share, if you're not driving, if you're willing to share where you have seen God, beauty, truth, goodness, found inspiration, or hope in the midst of a week of presidential debates. um, where have you seen, outside of politics, where have you seen God at work in your life, in your world, in the people, and the places that you've experienced this past week? Hopefully, if you're watching, you let me know. You share a little bit about what that might look like. For me, I've had a few. As most of you know, I work at Summit Church. First of all, I guess I maybe should have started that way. I work at Summit Church as a Three Springs campus pastor. And I started at the beginning of this year with this passion of creating new faith communities for people, but also finding creative ways to serve our community. And that's the heart of Summit Church and a lot of the things that we do. It's already in there. But my hope and desire wasn't just to replicate what we already have, but to explore creative new options. And I've had a couple of meetings this week in particular that have been really invigorating for potential possibilities of things and ways we can serve the community and cultivate, build community, bring hope, and change lives. Good morning, Mary. Good morning, Scott. Thanks for letting me know you're here. Where have you guys seen beauty, truth, and goodness in the world? So I hope to share more of those in the future as they come along. But I would ask for continued prayers as we continue to explore what it might look like to build community, change lives, and bring hope to people in Three Springs and the surrounding areas in a creative, different way. We really believe that's what God is calling us to do, and so we're exploring that. It's a hard year for all of us. It's a hard year to try to even think about some of that. But in the midst of all that, we're trusting that God is working through that. So thank you for letting me share a little bit about that. I'm excited for what that might lead. Where have you seen beauty, truth, and goodness in the world today? Today, I want to invite you to think about that idea of brokenness and healing. We've been talking about the Enneagram. This week is the last of the Enneagram sermon series. We talked about Enneagram type 1 this past week. Ones are sometimes called the perfectionist, which is a more of a negative characteristic, but it also hones in on perhaps helping people find that type. A better name is the reformer. The Apostle Paul is an example of somebody who represented an Enneagram type 1. Also, John the Baptist. That gives us a little bit of an idea of what type 1s are like. They're driven to improve themselves, others, and the world around them. Two of my favorite authors are Enneagram type 1s. If you've heard of Brene Brown, she's an Enneagram type 1. I think I enjoy reading from type 1s so much because they both challenge and inspire me to be a better person, to grow and to contribute to the world. We all have a responsibility. We all have something inside of us, and we need you to do something with that gift or those gifts that you have. So ones have a way of bringing about this, both this challenge and this inspiration that says, no, you need to do something. We all need to do something. So I appreciate ones. Some adjectives that describe type 1s, they're conscientious, responsible, improvement-oriented, consistent, self-controlled, precise. They have high standards. They're clear, detail-oriented, and caring. There's a lot there for type 1s. One of my greatest passions, things that I really focus on that have kind of progressed my life, is this idea of spiritual formation, which is this idea that you and I can participate in our spiritual growth. as we join together with what the Spirit is doing in our lives and the world around us. As Methodists, traditionally we've called that sanctification. One of the things I like most about the Enneagram is that it helps us better understand our own unique ways. It gives us maps to help us a little bit in how we can participate in better ways in our own spiritual formation. It looks differently for each type and differently for every person in every type. It's not like you're going to resonate with each thing, but we're looking specifically at ones. And I love how we went around the table because, you know, I'm different than you. You're different than me, different from your partner, different from your kids. We kind of notice those things. We have different areas that we can grow in. We have different gifts that we each bring. One of the things that ones bring is the gift of reforming, of doing things, of seeing what can be done better. That is a huge gift, because if we didn't have that, we just continue to do what we've always done. And maybe we need ones more than ever, right? Maybe, I don't know if you're like me and you're thinking something's seriously broken with the world and our nation right now. We need and we should do better. Thanks, Mary, for sharing, helping serve dinner this evening. Thank you for doing that. Summit Church is participating in serving dinner for the sheriff's office and the deputies and those who work for the sheriff's office. And many of our community written cards of thank you for them. So I extend gratitude on behalf of all of them. Thank you for participating in that. So we're using the Apostle Paul's life. Today, I'm kind of going to jump off the daily meditations a little bit. I hope that's okay. But it's speaking to me, and maybe something will speak to you. So we see in the Apostle Paul's life this desire to improve. Once Paul, passionately fighting against the church, originally called Saul, has an experience that dramatically changes his life. Now he passionately works for the church. As an archetypal Enneagram 1, Paul doesn't do anything halfway. He does everything with passion, zeal, to the best that he can do. This is, for better or worse, Enneagram type 1. They do things full bore. For them to do halfway means that they're exhausted, and it's really hard for them to just let it go. So they do everything the best they can. Paul's life reveals a truth that's not just for Enneagram type 1s, but for all of us, I think. Paul's experience breaks him open. He has this experience with the risen Christ. He sees a light. He hears a voice. He's confused. He can't see for a time. And I think perhaps this is a model for growth in all of our lives, for healing in all of our lives, for salvation in all of our lives, that oftentimes our growth, our healing, our salvation comes through experiences that are difficult, that are painful, that are confusing, that are not fun. I don't think Paul was enjoying that time. I think Paul was lost, confused, uncertain, and dealing with a lot internally. As he began to realize he was actually working against the Spirit's move in the world. This brokenness or humbling allowed the Spirit to work in his life. It reminds me of a text, one of my favorite texts that I've been reading a lot lately. John 12:24. Verily, Jesus says, truly I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Again, unless a single grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. There's a truth that is revealed in nature, in the seed, in the seasons. Well, God's desire is for every one of us to experience abundant, everlasting, eternal life. In order to live into that life, there is a death that is needed, that is necessary, a brokenness. By the way, this is when we go through the sacrament of baptism, this is a death buried in water and a resurrection. Paul experiences a death of his own ego, his own ambition, his own internal drive for improvement and perfection, and experiences a love that transforms him. It's interesting. Notice that even though Jesus does say, Paul or Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Jesus doesn't come down with thunder and lightning and chastise Saul. It's love that transforms. It's never judgment. It's forgiveness. It's grace. It's love. Our scripture memory verse this week, Romans 5:8. But God showed his love to us while we were still sinners. Christ died for us. And I think there's a deep truth that's revealed in this text. Again, we are saved, healed. By the way, the same Greek word used in the New Testament for saved is also the word healed. We're saved, we're healed, not by working harder, not by improving ourselves, not by drinking less, going to church more. We are saved surely, utterly, and completely by love. I think for me, that's convicting during this season. That love, as Paul experienced, was a love that melted away his own ego and invited him into something new. Like a seed, our healing, our salvation, and our abundant life is experienced through brokenness. But this is the difficult but transformative message that lies at the heart of the gospel. But the invitation here is not just a one-time invitation. It's not a one-time sort of transaction. It's an ongoing work. It's an invitation that we experience every day, whether we're aware of it or not. And really, spiritual formation is mostly about becoming more aware of listening and hearing and being sensitive to what the Spirit is saying and doing and inviting us into. It's really how can we become more awakened? How can we see? How can we notice? Because God is working all the time in all places and all people. So what is a question that'll end this time? Kind of a shorter devotional today, but a question that'll end this time that I invite you to wrestle with, perhaps even share or post. What is the new thing that you feel invited into? Perhaps you're a new parent. Perhaps it's focusing in this season on marriage or a specific relationship. Maybe it's a broken relationship. Maybe it's a relationship that's going well. Maybe it's mending something that had been going well and then just distance. Maybe it is a new career, a career change. Maybe it's just digging deeper into your career. Maybe it's retirement, not in a sense of my work here is done. Thank God I'm through with that. But in a now, what is my work to do in the world? Now that I'm retired, now that I'm in this season, what is that new thing? Maybe it's during COVID time, what some people are calling COVID time. What am I invited into now? Maybe it's during this political season. What is the invitation for me? So what is the new thing that you feel invited into? And can you give yourself over to this new thing? Can you give yourself over into this? It's true for every new thing. It requires a death of something, a brokenness. That brings it back and reminds us, oh, we get excited about that new thing. Like I get excited about trying to start something in Three Springs, but sitting with it day in and day out and being consistent, and during COVID and during people who get excited about something and then say no or don't show up or whatever it might be, that excitement, that staying with it over the long haul is a sort of death for me. It is a sort of, I'm going to stay with this. I'm going to continue and just see. If not for these people, then for who? If not this, then what? Can you let go of the urge to resist, which we all struggle with? and see an invitation in the midst of the struggle. One of the reasons I think we often resist the Spirit's leading is because, again, we experience healing through brokenness. And that's painful and it's hard, and our egos don't like it. So we fight against it. I mean, Paul, the apostle, says, why don't I do the things I want to do? And why do I do the things I don't want to do? And you can see him wrestling. And this is true in all of our lives. We wrestle. We don't just say yes to everything all the time. And half the time we're not always even aware we're saying no. As Paul, we sometimes think we're doing the work of God, and it's our own egos. And through that brokenness, he realizes and recognizes, oh, I was mistaken. There's something else going on here. Can you see that the disruptions are actually invitations? Again, it's not an easy thing. We don't like disruptions. I hate disruptions. I mean, yeah. Can you see that through the brokenness that God is working in to bring new life, healing, and something new? So, what is God doing new in your life? Run, not true. You do not say yes to everything. Maybe saying yes to everything isn't the Spirit's leading in your life. Maybe it's to learn to say no to some things. Got you right there. But if you feel inclined to share, what is that thing you're being invited into in this season? I know for me, it's to be consistent in all that I'm doing here. In the midst of COVID, in the midst of everything else that's happening around me, how can I keep putting myself out there and saying, okay, if not for these people, then for who? If not this, then what? And through that, trusting that God is leading, that the Spirit is guiding in the midst of all that is going on in my life. So what does that mean for you? Awesome. I think that's all I have today. So yeah, hopefully something I said maybe touched you, maybe pricked something inside of you, made you think about something, gave you an inclination or an idea or a hint or a suggestion. And yeah, I really hope that was the case. So thank you so much for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for another devotional. So we appreciate you guys and all you're doing and interactions and prayers during this season. May you experience and be open to the new thing that God is inviting you into.